Okay, firing animation. So I went to my template scene and I've saved it as weapon fire sync already, just so that we know we're not working with we're not editing the template scene anymore. Let's turn on auto key and select all handles and make sure we have a key on the start frame. Right, so let's make the timeline a lot shorter, say 18 frames. It's a bit long for a firing animation, but okay, so what does the gun do when it fires? It flies backwards. So let's begin by doing that. So it should fly backwards really quite fast. And then it goes up and rotates backwards. And then comes back to rest, so I'm going to shift drag. What I will do is I'll rotate actually downwards initially. Maybe a bit more rotation there. Let's see what that looks like in first person in real time. Okay, it's a good start. We do want the movement backwards to be faster though. So let's go into our curve editor and go with Y position, which is, as we know, the forwards back. We can maybe not ease this, so I think it's set to slow tangent. If we set it to linear, then it will just instantly start to move backwards a lot faster. So let's actually take this first key and really move it back and then adjust the curve so that we get a really fast movement. And then maybe carry the movement backwards a bit more. Yeah, it's a bit more punchy. So maybe we want to rotate the gun upwards a bit more. So let's go to the X rotation. And again, I'll make this linear. So we actually rotate the gun slightly downwards initially. And the gun, you can see the end of the gun sort of rotates up and then kind of stops. So what I want it to do is keep carrying on rotating upwards and then come to rest. Alright, maybe a bit of a Y rotation. So let's rotate the gun this way a bit and then back round. Delete this key, so you also get a bit of rotation. That's maybe a bit too much for the initial rotation. Okay, let's watch it in real time. So if you don't want the timeline to loop, you could just go down here and untick loop. Make sure we're on 30. I didn't really explain this before, but NTSC frame rate is fine. 30 frames is fine. I don't think the frames actually matter when you're exporting animations in game, but I could be wrong. Actually, I think I've exported with a really high FPS to try and solve jitter in the past, but it didn't really do much. But 30 frames is fine. So we turned off loop, so this time when I hit my play shortcut, it just plays it once and that's it. So it's a good way to sort of not be overloaded with animation, the movement of the animation. Okay, that's linear, that. I still feel like we're not moving backwards quite fast enough, so let's make the distance greater initially. Let's see. So I am aware that the hammer and trigger needs to be moved when the weapon fires. But for now we're just doing a super simple animation just to show. So maybe I want the rest to be slower, back to rest to be slower. So I can add a key here. So if I hit A, that gives me the add keys tool, and then I add a key and make it so that the curve is much slower coming back. Oh, actually, no, I've made it faster, haven't I? So, actually, yeah, I've Completely forgotten how keys actually work. So that's because of the distance it has to move. Let's actually extend the end of the time configuration, and then make sure we have all handles selected, and just drag the last keyframe so that the rest is a bit slower. Yeah, that's better. Okay, right, let's okay, so in order for the animation to actually trigger firing, we need to go to the dope sheet, and then I'm going to open schematic view and make sure we have the root selected, and then we're going to open transform, root, and then transform, and go to our notes. Now you see here there are some annotations which were in my template scene, so make sure in your template scene you've moved these annotations to the left, because I think they trigger footstep sounds, which is not what you want in your idle. I didn't notice it earlier, but yeah, you want to make sure these are out of the timeline, because this is the first frame, so if they're all the way over here they won't affect the animation. Okay, so let's hit A for the add keys, click here, and that creates a key. Kind of hard to see because the timeline's in the way. If I right click it, we get a notes dialog. I'm just going to type weapon fire, lowercase w, uppercase F, and that will trigger the weapon to fire. Alright, we're ready for export, at least our first iteration of this animation. So I simply read what it says at the top of what my file is saved as, and I just type that out. Ready means it's in the sort of hip fire position, whereas sighted means it's sighted with the iron sights. So I'll save and hit run configuration, and then save the configuration so that inside this file it will always save as weapon fire single ready. Let's extract it into our folder. What we do need to do is there are actually several variations, and it might use the vanilla ones, so we'll just delete these two. Copy this, rename it, copy it again, rename it B. So now we have the 3 firing variations, and you can create these, you can make these files different, or you can leave them the same. If you want to go full effort, then you can animate these 3 files separately and differently, so you get some nice variation in the fire anims. So yeah, let's fire our weapon in game and see what we've ended up with. Alright, let's try it out. I've turned on God mode so that I don't run out of ammo and trigger the vanilla reload so that the weapon will explode. So yeah, let's see what the animation looks like. So it is a bit slow. At least when the weapon kicks back it needs to be faster. Fast and then slow for weapon firing. But if we fire it in quick succession, yeah, it's pretty serviceable. The weapon does sort of return roughly to where it needs to be before it fires the next shot. So make sure your timing is such that the weapon isn't sort of still recoiling when you're able to fire again. Otherwise it can look a bit odd. Alright, so let's go back and maybe animate the trigger and the hammer. Alright, so I'm going to do something a little controversial here, and I'm actually going to delay the firing 2 frames. So let's begin by moving the annotation to frame 3, or frame 2 rather, because we start on frame 0. I'm going to select all handles, and I'm going to, actually I'll just select the main controller, and I'll delay so that it fires after 2 frames only. Let's check the speed, make sure we've got the speed fast enough. It does feel faster. Let's make it even more severe. I wonder if we can, yeah, we can't go back a frame because that would overwrite the original frame. Maybe just ease this a bit more. It is getting a bit close to the camera, so I want to be mindful of that, but since we're firing one-handed, it is going to be a hell of a lot of recoil. Okay, so let's grab the hammer bone, which I believe was weapon extra 1. I don't think that's easily grabbable from the... unless I go into wireframe, it's not too easy to grab, so let's rotate it back on this frame and then snap it back on this frame. So I wonder if we can just let's just drag the first frame. Actually, let's have it so that it goes back for 2 frames and then forwards on the last frame. Next, let's animate the trigger. So that it rotates backwards and maybe finishes rotating on the last and then returns to original position. There you go. Let's also pull the finger back. We don't actually have any frames for it yet, so let's make sure we do have origin frames. Let's ever so slightly, quite a hair trigger this one, pull the finger back but not clip into the trigger. Last thing we need to do is rotate the cylinder into position when the finger pulls the trigger. So let's select our weapon magazine bone. Whoops, wrong shortcut. And actually rotate it, I believe 72 degrees. Whoops, I don't even have angle on. Oh dear. Oh no. So I think we oh, yeah, okay, so I was in world rotation mode, and because the weapon is actually rotating, that's not a good rotational mode to be in, so local is better, but we're still getting a bit of rotational weirdness there. I definitely need to look into that. Okay, so if you were to watch the vanilla, I think the cylinder rotates this way. In yeah, the real version, but I'll obviously check reference later. I can't quite remember now. But yeah, anyway, what I was saying, if you watch the vanilla revolver cylinder turn, I think I showed this earlier, I can't remember. The cylinder turns, and then 1 frame after it's finished turning, it snaps back to the original. So that's what we need to replicate here. So it rotates, and then 1 frame after, it snaps back instantly. And just to make sure we're really reset, I'm going to copy it to the back. Okay, so we have a sort of firing animation where the hammer moves back. I maybe want to increase the how far the hammer does move back. Yeah. Okay. Let's export it and see what it looks like in game, and I'll copy the files so that they overwrite A and B off screen. Alright, so I actually went ahead and did a few fixes before jumping in game. And one of them was to actually add a projectile node to the receiver in 3DS 2013, because I wasn't getting any muzzle flashes and I didn't notice up until now. So I went and fixed that, and there were a few other things, such as fixing the finger so that it returned to the origin at the end of the animation so that it looped properly, as well as making sure that I was actually correct with the cylinder turning clockwise initially. I did tweak the animation a bit more, so here is what it looks like, and in slow motion. So here I watched a few reference videos of other animators and how they animated powerful one-handed guns, and the gun sort of rears back, and then because it's so heavy it sort of wobbles in the hand backwards and forwards. I thought I had a really cool effect to it. So that's how I achieved. Probably see it better if I put it down here. But I need to be able to use the track bar. So the revolver comes back, it rotates backwards, and then it actually doesn't rotate any further for a bit and then continues to rotate, and that's how I did that sort of forwards rotation wobble that I think has a really cool effect to it. Alright, so let's jump in game. And here's what the animation looks like in game. I think the delay really adds to the character of the weapon. When I click the mouse, it's actually a slight a millisecond before the weapon actually fires, and I think simulating the double action in this way really adds a lot to the feel of the gun and the sort of the powerfulness of it, because you know you get a pause and then the big explosion of the round being fired. So yeah, very happy with this. I'm glad I experimented. What I'll probably do is edit the idle so that it doesn't drop down and back up. So it starts at the, sort of the normal level, then drops down and back up. I think I'll change it so that it starts, goes up a bit, then down, and then back up. So that it doesn't... Because if I fire a shot and then pause and then fire another shot, you can sort of see the gun slowly sink down between each shot, and it's an effect I don't really want to have. So I think I'll push forwards and actually go through more of the animations in my own time, really polish them, and then show you the results of my work, and then maybe later on I'll record the entire animation of the reload so that you can see how a really complicated animation actually gets made. Okay, we are back, and I have moved on with the majority of the animation, so I thought I'd quickly run through sort of what I've done for each one and what the animation files look like. So yeah, starting with the weapon equip. This is the animation where you have the weapon equipped in game, but not currently, equipped. you have it equipped, but you don't have it in your hands. So you haven't pulled the trigger. You've holstered it. So, yeah. All I did was I loaded the template scene, and I moved the first key. I copied it to the end, and then I worked backwards and moved the gun off screen at the start, and then it just comes on screen. Not much else to say really. There's no annotations because the game will use its own sounds to... we don't have to trigger the holstering or unholstering sounds. So this is weapon equip fast. It's the animation that you get when you switch to a weapon. So say you have, the 10mm out and you switch to the hunting revolver, it'd quickly bring the gun out like this. It's just a bit faster than the standard equip. So again, I worked in reverse. I started with the template pose, and then I moved the gun off screen. But it does come on screen in a slightly different way, as if you're pulling it out from somewhere else, like a side holster or something, an offhand holster somewhere else. Okay. I've got weapon. Okay, fire single ready. I don't think I've changed too much about this since last time. It's still the same old animation which you've probably seen before. Yeah, don't think I need to talk at length about this one because I showed it so much. Fire single sighted. So for this one, I actually took the animation which we just saw then, and all I did was, so you notice I'm not in auto key mode. There's no red boundary around the viewport. I started with the fire animation, which was the one that I made before, and all I did was move the gun into the center so that if I go into perspective view and then go to front view, just lined up the model so that the the bone is on, well, almost 0, 0. Actually, it's on 0.08, which I think I covered before as a sort of fixed position for an off origin gun. But yeah, it's a sighted animation, which means iron sights, which means you need the gun in the center, and that's effectively all I did. And it's the same animation, maybe a little tweaked as the fire animation, which I just showed. Right. Grenade throw. These ones can be a bit challenging, but yeah, the gun moves up into a sort of out of the way position, and then the left hand comes in and sort of throws an object. So if we take a look at the annotations, I'll hit H for select from scene, go to root, make sure you have it selected, and then dope sheet. We can see here the sound of the sound played at weapon grenade throw. That triggers the sound descriptor that plays the grenade throwing sound, which is quite a few frames before it's even on screen. Weapon attach 0.2. I think the 0.2 just means the secondary hand or the secondary weapon. So that actually attaches the grenade visually to the hand. You might not see this in vanilla animation, the vanilla grenade throwing animations for the vanilla weapons, because it's so fast, but yeah, that's what this keyword does. It visually attaches the grenade, and then the actual weapon fire occurs and actually releases the grenade, which then fires the grenade out. So you can see there that hand is sort of only just opening then as the grenade is fired out. If I show what that looks like in in third person, yeah, pretty weird, right? So I've effectively moved the clavicle or the collarbone really far forwards, so that when the hand fully extends out, it doesn't lock out. So if this collarbone was rotated backwards, you'd see that the hand can't make it to the IK controller. You see it's stretching out, but it can't quite make it. So bear that in mind. If you're really stretching out your arms, you want to move the collarbones forwards, because the first person camera is never going to see it, and you get this nice sort of bent arm effect where the arm's really stretching out. Let's take a look at the movement of this left hand. So here we see the hand shoots out forwards, because the y-axis is the forward axis. It shoots out and then sort of comes back a bit and then fast back. So yeah, like a really good throwing motion might need to be tweaked quite a bit to get the right motion that you want. So here the hand comes from the left side over to the right, and then back sort of to the moving to the center. So it comes from the left to the middle and then back a bit. In terms of up and down, quite a simple arc, to be honest. The hand comes up, peaks out there, and then drops down like that. And then these rotational keyframes are a bit complicated, because the hand sort of moves and rotates so much. They don't really correspond clearly to any movement. But yeah, block out your animation and you should be fine. So what's next? Idle gun down. So again, like I did with the sighted animation, all I did was take the regular idle, which was sort of here, if you will, and came out of auto key mode and just moved it into that position, and boom, instant idle. I did add a bit of sort of thumb movement just to make it a bit more interesting. But yeah, this would only ever trigger. It's called gun down, and that's because in the vanilla game, if you get really up against a wall or you're talking to someone, you lower your weapon and you point it towards the ground. I felt like, it's the big eye and you sort of want to point it to the sky, have it take up quite a bit of the screen. You want it to feel like a big gun, so that's what I chose to do. Okay. Weapon idle ready. I think we've gone over that already. It's obvious what that is. So weapon idle ready A through D. These are the sort of fidgets that we talked about before. So this is sort of an inspect animation that I did really fast and rough to see if it worked well in game. It kind of does. I don't like the rotation at the end here, where the nose of the gun sort of arcs around weirdly. I'll try and fix that. I'll come back to that. But yeah, you want to sort of have quite simple animations, otherwise, yeah. I made this animation idle ready B, C and D as well, so it triggers quite often and it is quite obnoxious, but it'll be fine once it's just one of the many. Okay, weapon idle sighted. So yeah, again, I had the idle ready and all I did was I moved the gun into the center and then I really reduced the curves. So I really sort of dragged them down from where they used to be, because the point of the sighted idles is that they have to be really subtle. So I go into front view and play the animation. You can see there's very little movement because, yeah, basically you need to be able to aim with it. So you don't want the sights to go too sort of off zero, get too out of alignment, because then you can't aim reliably with them. Okay. Idle sighted. Okay, melee. So with this one, I pull the right gun back, extend out the left arm, and then thrust the right gun forwards and back to rest. So yeah, like that. If we take a look at the root annotations, we have the sound play of the sound play weapon melee swing A. This actually happens. These 4 frames are directly next to each other, so this is 4 consecutive frames of annotations. So the sound play, the weapon swing, I'm not entirely sure what the purpose of this annotation is. The pre-hit frame, obviously 1 frame before the actual hit frame, and then the hit frame. This is probably what triggers the hit detection in the game. So as soon as this annotation fires, you get the damage, the hit on the enemy, and they react. But yeah, for most melee type animations, you get these 4 annotations just directly one after the other. So it's quite easy to place. Just find the frame that you think is the one that actually hits the enemy, and then line these up. So the actual movement of the weapon is extremely fast. Yeah, I think 1 frame it's off screen, then the next frame it's on screen, and then the next frame after that it's actually impacting the enemy, then staying there for a bit, and then sort of coming back and returning to position. So yeah, with the grenade throw, the melee, all these really fast moving movements, you want to make them really fast, because in-game the frame rate does affect the speed of animations. I think I'll show that later. I've just realised I've not added much camera movement, or not added any camera movement at all, so I'll just really quickly do that. So you'd sort of rear back, so let's take the camera and really slightly ease it back and rotate it to the right. So you go from centered sort of to up and right, and then smack it in. So we're going to copy the frame to keep the camera there, and then move the camera into the sort of bash position, and then return it to its original position slowly afterwards. We'll see how that plays out. Yeah, could probably start moving the camera before the weapon hits, and maybe lean in just a bit more. You want to be really subtle with these camera movements. I'm probably not being, but I can always tone it down later when I'm not so time constricted. So yeah, that's the sort of movement that you'd want in a melee animation. Might as well save that so I don't lose it and I can alter it later. Okay. Mine throw. This is very similar to the grenade. In fact, I think I repurposed the grenade animation for this, and I just changed the movement of the left hand. So it's like, I don't know, it's like you're serving a pizza or something. Yeah, the mine comes out and sort of you leave it on the ground. Not as fast as mines. When mines are thrown by the player, they don't go nearly as far. So you definitely don't want an overdone animation for this. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention in the grenade throw animation, this bone here, the BIP L weapon, is very important. This is where the grenade and the mine actually get attached. So this is the position that they'll actually appear in game when they get attached by the weapon attach .2 annotation. So it's very important to get the placement right, at least on these two animations, the grenade throw and the mine throw. You want this bone to be in the right position. I've also realised I didn't take my trigger off the finger for this. That's bad. At least I'm pointing at the sky and not at anything important. I'll try and remember to fix that later. Let's take a look at the annotations. So again, hit H to select from scene. Let's go to the dope sheet. And we have 3 annotations. So weapon attached, that attaches the mine to the bone quite early, before it's even on screen. And now this sound play weapon mine throw, I think this is much earlier than the grenade annotation. This is the sound of the mine priming itself. So you want that to happen off screen, because it's kind of dubious as to, yeah, how you actually arm the mine. God knows how the character actually, you know, pulls the pin on a grenade or arms a mine with just one hand, but it's pretty impressive how they can do that. But yeah, the mine comes up, and then, yeah, weapon fire .2 annotation actually fires the mine out at the peak of the movement. So yeah. So that's pretty self-explanatory. I should probably do some camera movement for this as well. I might not have gone through all the animations and checked that they all have camera movement this time, but you'd probably rotate the camera down and then up as the mine pops out. Okay, so weapon reload, this is just a test animation which I did, just to test that some parts are moving. It's so that I could trigger it in game by just hitting R. But I'm not going to show it because it's just a just a test animation. Run forward ready. So this is a 20 frame running animation. In Fallout 4, running is effectively what you do when you hold the control stick down, or press W. That's what running is classed as, at least in the game files. So yeah, I've not added any camera movement. There is camera movement in the vanilla files, but I think it conflicts with the movement of the weapon, so I like to sort of keep it clean. I might try and add camera movement later, but it hasn't been playing well with the movement of the gun. But if we take a look at the position, the keyframes of the gun, so it moves to the left, and then to the right, and then these start and end keyframes are linearized, so that they just continue into one another. That's a bit unbalanced. That's a bit more equal. So the Y, nothing on the Y, so no forwards, backwards movement. We do have Z movement up and down. So the weapon drops, boom, left foot on the ground, up, and boom, right foot on the ground, and then back up. So that you get the up and down movement of the gun. Then we've got X rotation, that's the nose going up and down. So as the gun is dropping, the nose is pointing upwards, and as it hits the ground, the nose points downwards. So that's some sort of secondary motion there. Motion that reacts to the main movement, which is the rest of the body and the hand on the actual gun. So this actually adds, by playing in slow motion, it adds some weight to the gun. So you can see how the nose is sort of lagging behind the rest of the gun. I really like that effect. Okay, so this is the Y rotation. So the gun rotates to the left on the left step, and the right to the right on the right step, just to suggest just a bit more, really subtly, which foot is actually planting on the ground and when. And then Z rotation, which is this rotation here. Again, just like the Y rotation, it's really subtle, and it's sort of pointing the gun to the left and to the right as you walk. I made it really quite loose because it's one-handed, so without two hands on the gun, it would be quite a bit looser and quite a bit bouncy, I'd imagine. All right, let's take a look at the annotations. Okay, so we have foot left and sync left, and then foot right and sync right. And the sync annotations always come after their respective foot annotations. I don't know why. I don't really know what these sync keywords do. That's just how it is. That's where they go. So the left foot hits the ground. I'll try and organise here because I'm on a smaller resolution now that I'm recording. The foot left hits the ground, so it plays the left foot sound, and then the right foot hits the ground, and it plays the right foot sound, and then that just loops over and over again. Okay, and you get the same thing in the other movement animations, which we'll look at soon. Okay, run gun down. So yeah, this is another animation which will have the foot left and foot right annotations in it, and yeah, just like run forward ready. I did this one exactly like, yeah, so with auto key off, I simply moved the gun into an upright position, which then instantly gave me a usable running animation. You'd only really see this if you had some kind of, I think there's a mod called auto raise from cover, but there's a sort of non-script based version, or a script based version, I can't remember, but one of them's better than the other. One replaces animations and the other doesn't, but yeah, if you're one of those people that uses the sort of gun down when not using type mods, then this is the walking animation which you'll see at all times. So yeah, maybe worth spending a bit more time on it as the animator, knowing that. But yeah, otherwise it's quite a relatively rare animation, so it's nice to be able to repurpose the run animation for it. Okay, sprint. Yeah. So this one's quite interesting. Initially, I went with this animation. Again, 20 frames, like the run forward ready animation, and the left hand comes up and then down, and sort of the right hand comes up and then down. So when the left hand is extended out, the right arm is back, and when the right arm is extended out, the left arm is back and off screen. So yeah, I mean, we all know that's human limb coordination when you're sprinting, isn't it? But you might need to get up and sort of act out sprinting around a bit to try and get a feel for where your limb should be. As goofy as it sounds, it does help. But yeah, you can see that the camera movement as well adds a bit of dynamic, more of a dynamic movement to the movement of the animation when you're sprinting. And yeah, I think the annotations for foot left and foot right and sync left and sync right are in the exact same place as run forward ready, so I'm not going to show that. But there was one issue in game when you hit the sprint button, the weapon would sort of snap up into this ready position, which I didn't really like. Mainly my fault because I chose such a drastic position, a drastic pose for the gun. Because in the vanilla game, when you sprint, the gun is pointed down safely, whereas I chose to sort of point it upwards because, you know, it's the big iron. You're not gonna point it at the ground or anything. You know, you want it to be large and in charge, big on screen. That's just how you want it to be. So that's what I chose to do. So in order to fix that whole issue with the gun snapping into position, I actually created a different sprinting animation with an ease into the sprinting pose. So let's just play the animation and see what that looks like. Okay, so it's 1,000 frames long, which is around 30 seconds. And all I did was I took that file which we just saw from 0 to 20 and I copied it to I selected it all, dragged 0 to 20 and that gave me 0 to 40. Then I dragged 40, 0 to 40 and that gave me 0 to 80 and just kept on going. Then I made 100 and then copied it to 200, 300, just kept going until I got 1000, and that let me repeat the animation, just perfectly loop the animation as long as I wanted. And then what I did was I went to the very start and sort of eased it backwards into the template position, the idle position of the gun. So yeah, when you start sprinting, it nicely sort of transitions from the idle into the sprint. And actually, if we go right to the end, super fast running, then you see that the gun comes back down and then back up as we loop around into the animation again. So I don't think you'd really ever see that loop. It's nice to have there because then it means the weapon doesn't weirdly say it was here and then boom, suddenly it's that's going to look weird in game if it transitions back like that. But I don't think you'd ever really see this loop unless you had some kind of infinite sprint mod installed, like I have, because I like to get around without ruining my action points and having to walk. But I really, it's nice to have it there because otherwise, very, very rarely people might see something weird happen with your animation. So yeah, I just really quickly made sure it looped around somehow. But the key part is this part which transitions into the sprint, and it allows me to have such a obnoxious, if you will, weapon position for the sprint. So we'll see that in game in a bit. And we have unequip. So this is just like the equip, except the gun just gets put away. So the gun starts on screen, the template position, and then off screen. So I wanted to go for a sort of, in those movies where someone comes around the corner with their gun raised and they see it's a friendly, and they're like, oh, I don't want to shoot you, so they point the gun upwards to show that they're not going to shoot them, and then put it away. That's kind of what I wanted to do. I might make the initial movement a bit faster to show that I really don't want to hit you, but I actually point the gun downwards, so the X rotation, I point the gun, I could maybe even point it a bit more downwards to really show that it's being put into a holster on the hip, and I'll make sure to request sort of leather holster sounds from my sound guy to really suggest the fact that it's being pulled in and out of a holster. Western style. Okay, we finally have walk forward sighted. The name is pretty confusing because the everything else that's to do with running is called run. When you move normally, it's running. Oh, though I guess if you're sighted, then you're not really running, are you? You're moving a lot slower. Yeah, I forgot about that. If you're sighted in Fallout 4, then you're moving very slow. But yeah, to cut to the chase, all I did here was take the run forward ready animation and move it into the center. Again, it's a sighted animation, it's an iron sights animation, so we need the sights zeroed in, even though they aren't there. There we go. Zeroed into the camera, and then I just reduced the curves really far down. So I grabbed them, held control, and just really reduced them down so that we got a lot less movement. Because even though you shouldn't really be walking around and sighted if you really want to hit something, we still need it to be usable. So I definitely wouldn't use the full sort of movement as I did with regular running on the sighted, because it's very easy for the sights to go out of zero. Okay, so that really covers all the animations. I think at this point we can jump in game and I can show you what all those animations look like in game. Okay, so let's take a look. So there's the equip animation. No sound yet because I haven't got a sound yet. Yeah, Let's walk around, or run rather. Very nice. Let's try firing. Got some new sounds from my new sound friend Navarro. There's the idle animation, weaponade already, eh? Okay, the sighted animation. Pretty good. It is really just the fire animation, but moved into the center. Let's take a look at this sprint animation now. So yeah, if I walk forwards and then hit the sprint key, you see that there's a bit of a jerking motion. If I manage to turn on slower time scale and sprint forwards, you can see the weapon sort of jumps upwards a bit before it goes into the sprinting animation. I'll have to look into that. But otherwise I think it looks pretty good. Just when you stop a sprint, the gun does sort of jump back into position. If we look at a vanilla weapon, here the 44, yeah, the weapon does sort of... it's not got as far to move as mine, so it's not as big an issue. It's not an issue at all, really. But with mine, because of the huge movement, you do need that transition baked into the actual animation itself. Yeah, see, do I have mines or... Okay, grenades, good. See there the grenade animation? Now for the mines. Cool. That's the weapon attach keyword working nicely, so if I slow that down... Yeah, you see the mine come out on the hand. And if I switch back to the grenades, you can see, whoops, here, yeah, just about see the grenade attached to the hand. Okay, what else? Yeah, we have the melee animation. Pretty good. If I actually hit something, you can hear the melee sound is working pretty well, timed with the animation. If I press my face up into something, we can see the idle animation. Then if I walk forwards into it, you can see the gun down, run forward ready animation. Okay, what else? Oh yeah, the fast equip. So yeah, when I switch to a different weapon with the number keys, you can see that, yeah, a different equip animation plays. Love that sound. So all that's really left is the reload. So yeah, that's my test animation, just to make sure that if I turn off God mode, so that I actually lose a bullet here, just to make sure that the annotations are working properly. And there, see, I get 5 rounds back, but also so that the yoke moves properly and all of the bullets are in the correct position, so that when I do move on to the reload, everything's working properly, because you don't really see the inside of the cylinder on any other animation. So yeah, I think now we can move on to probably the most important animation, which is the reload.